Okay, so starting with negative and positive numbers. Leah, do you have a quick question? Okay, starting with negatives and positives, I'm going to wait till everybody's attention. So look at me, so I know you're listening. Put your feet on the floor. Sit up straight. Bailey.
The last negative, it says 15 over 4.
Yes. It's an improper fraction.
Oh.
Right. The goals today are to be able to understand negative and positive numbers, like where they go on the number line. To understand how to change improper fractions to mixed numbers and mixed numbers to improper fractions, which you did last year, but we'll review. And then to understand what absolute value is. Those are the 3 goals. When you think of negatives, a lot of you probably remember them from elementary school, but maybe not everybody has a very good comfort with them. So great example of where you guys see negatives and positives in Colorado are in our temperature and in our altitude, like where we live. So on the left here, today it's in the morning at my house. I got up to go, I usually get up to go run, and I think that was yesterday. It was about 36 degrees out yesterday in the morning. And this time of year, that's kind of typical. Once in a while, in the Denver, Boulder area, we drop below 0. But not a lot. But once in a while, usually 3 or 4 days a year, I get out early and it's below 0. Maybe 5 degrees below 0. So that's a negative number. When we say 5 degrees below 0, we're really saying it's negative 5 degrees. So, Roman, would you say it's colder when it's 5 below 0 or 20 below 0?
20 below.
20 below 0. That means negative 20 is a smaller number than negative 5. And that's kind of weird for people. If you think about it, on this number line, you guys know that when you go to the right, numbers get larger. So that must mean when you go to the left, numbers get smaller. So negative 5 is smaller than negative 1 because it's to the left. Does that make sense? When you go left on a number line, you're going smaller and smaller. That is much harder for people to understand than when it drops way below 0. We know that's way colder because it's a smaller number. That's more logical for people. The higher it gets, the bigger the number. So if you can think about a thermometer, I think that really helps you with negatives and positives. The other place you see negatives and positives is altitude. You know, we're above sea level. In our world, we count sea level as 0. No elevation. It's right at the sea. So our altitude, not on this picture here, well, Denver is pretty close. We're a little higher than Denver. We're more than 5,000 feet above the ocean shore. So we're a positive altitude. But there are places like Death Valley in California that is actually below sea level. Not just a desert, but below sea level. So it's possible to be below sea level. Another place that is below sea level that came pretty famous when you guys were maybe like, I don't know, 1st grade, was New Orleans because they had that big hurricane and their, levees. The levees broke. And they are below sea level, and then when they had that hurricane, New Orleans was damaged very badly. And partly because, you know, that hurricane brought water and it just flooded them out. Matt.
2 years ago, I used to live in one of the valleys, near Death Valley.
Oh, you did?
And it was like 250 feet close.
Yes, Death Valley. I think this is maybe not perfectly accurate. I think this is grounded a little bit. Maybe it is accurate. I do know. What valley was that?
It's controlled.
Okay. So coming out of Death Valley, right, you've got to get back up to sea level somehow. Roman.
Wouldn't a sinkhole be considered below sea level if it was all the way down?
Yeah, if it was like in San Francisco, for example, where I grew up, there was a sinkhole by my house. Well, my house was on a hill, but if you were at a sinkhole right at the road that was next to the shore, technically that's below sea level. But not very far. But it's a negative number, so that's the big goal today, is to understand not just negative numbers on a number line, but what do those really mean? That's what we're going to work on. So, in this problem, I'm just curious. I'm going to call on you guys, and I want you to tell me where these numbers fall. And you could tell me if it's between -5 and -4, or -4 and -3, -3 and -2, -2, -1, -1 and 0, 0 and 1. So tell me the two numbers it's between. So let's just start with, how about Jack? 3/4. Where would you place 3/4? So you're going to tell me two numbers it's between. No, because it's think of it. Well, let's see if somebody can help you. Bella, tell the answer and tell them a way to think about it.
Okay, so it's between 0 and 1.
It's between 0 and 1. So first of all, when you do homework tonight, rather than crowd all of these numbers onto your number line, a better way to do that is just draw an arrow and put a point. So give me a way, or give us a way, Bella, to think about how did you know that?
Well, I know that 3/4 is not 1, but I think
Okay, for example, think of, so she knows it's close to 1. Think of 3/4. Doesn't that make 75 cents? And 3 out of 4 quarters makes 75 cents. And remember, we think of money as a decimal, and it's not a whole dollar, right? So we put a 0 here. So it's not quite 1, but it's bigger than 0. Does that help? Okay. And the other thing that Bella was saying is, I think she's thinking from her previous experience, maybe even if you look into your notebook, we put equivalent fractions. The equivalent fraction for 1, it could be 4/4, because it's the same in the numerator and the denominator, so 3/4 is a little smaller. Does that help? Okay, so Courtney, where will you put -2/3? Between what two numbers? Just put your hands down, guys. We'll take questions next.
between -1 and 0.
Good. Between -1 and 0. So -2/3 is, another way to say that is it's the opposite of 2/3. And 2/3 would be about right here. So -2/3 is 2/3 to the left of 0. So I agree with you. And again, when you do your homework, just take an arrow and point to it, and then write your value. Put a dot on the line, maybe write your value below it or above it.
Can you say that name?
That's too small. Questions?
Well, not technically a question. I mean, could this work too? I didn't think, because I didn't know it's -0 or -2 and all that. I just like did this.
So if you don't have experience with negatives, this is a warm-up, right? So you weren't necessarily expected to get this perfect. We're going to work on it. So you had 2/3 instead of -2/3. That's why we're doing this. I'm sort of doing what I would say, checking your background knowledge. Oh, I lost the little dot. Okay, it's okay if you didn't have it right. Hannah, do you have a question? Yes. Nathan, why don't you do 10/6 for me first?
For the homework, is 6, is it 6 through 9 or 6, comma 9?
Comma. Thank you. Maybe Miss Haley could put a comma in there. Can you
Good
do
observation.
10/6 for me, Nathan? How do you think of 10/6? Where would you put that?
I would put, if it's 6, bigger than 1.
It's bigger than 1.
Like the 1 and 4/6 or 1 and 2/3.
Great. So he took 10/6 and with some mental math and probably knowledge from last year, he knows 6 goes into 10 one time. I don't know if you heard him say that. And the remainder is 4. So he said it's bigger than 1. It's 1 and 4/6, and you could even reduce that to 1 and 2/3. So that must mean it's bigger than 1, but it's less than 2. Would you say it's closer to 1 or closer to 2, Nathan?
I would say closer to 2.
Closer to 2, so we're going to put a point on the number line and then tell the reader, the person looking at your work, what it is by putting the value above it. You know, because it makes things less crowded, like I could shrink this little arrow up, I think. Well, maybe I can. But when you do your homework, you know, it's much easier than putting everything. Well, that's very interesting to me, that I can't make this smaller. But I could stagger my values, and then everything doesn't get too crowded.
What happens when you get everything too crowded?
You can't read it.
You can't even read it.
Yeah. So the arrows are great. Okay. And then Hannah, you were going to do the last one for me. So where would you put negative 15/4? It's simplified. So negative 15/4. I think what you meant to say is it's still negative though, right? Negative 3, because 3 times 4 is 12, and the remainder she said was 3/4. So what two numbers is that between? Negative 3 and, but it's 1, 2, 3, and 3/4. Did you see how that's a really common mistake though? It's closer to negative 4. Because if I were going to just draw 3 and 3/4, Steve, it would be 1, 2, 3, and then it'd be 3/4, like this. Do you see that? Okay, hold on. Do you agree with that? The negative, all the negative does is makes it opposite. It just flips it this way. From 0, it's just the opposite. It's the same distance in the other direction. So if on this side, if this is 3 and 3/4, if 3 and 3/4 is between positive 3 and positive 4, negative 3 and 3/4 has to be between negative 3 and negative 4. It has to be between the same opposite numbers.
Yeah, but 3/4, like you put right there, is closer to
4.
Yeah.
And
oh, we're doing that.
So negative 3 and 3/4 is closer to negative 4. Hannah.
And it's kind of like going backwards because 3 and 3/4, well, negative 3/4 is 1/4 away from 4.
Exactly. It's just 1/4 away from 4. And if I'm going to clean up my scratchbook here, one other thing to think about is every time you do a problem like that, you're really starting at 0 every time. So starting at 0, you're going in the negative direction for 3 whole units, 1, 2, 3, and then 3/4 of a unit. So every single time you plot a point, you're starting at 0. You have to go 3 and 3/4 away from 0 in the direction to the left. Okay? All right. So take out your notebook. I'm going to just post this while you're doing that.
What is it? 8 page, 9 page?